Okay, introducing our next speaker. In 2008, Christine DeJong joined the Technical Committee Operations Division of ASTM International. In her role as staff manager, she coordinates activities for multiple industries and directs the operations and strategic initiatives related to the standards work of over 10 technical committees. She serves as staff support for the Committee on Technical Committee Operations, a standing committee of the ASTM Board of Directors, which oversees the maintenance of ASTM regulations and various aspects of committee operations. Christine also provides bilingual support to the organization and its members. Christine holds a Bachelor of Arts in Law and Justice and a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish from Rowan University, a certificate in translation, and she is currently pursuing a master's in Central and Eastern European Studies from LaSalle University. Christine?
Thank you. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about ASTM International as an organization, as well as some related activities and within the technical committees area. So again, talk a little bit about ASTM. I'll talk about our standards development process, the global use and acceptance of the standards, as well as initiating activities. I'll talk about ASTM Technical Committee E44, and I'll briefly mention a few other supporting activities that we have going on for that technical committee. So just to give you a little background, ASTM's primary objective is to be the foremost developer and provider of consensus standards, related technical information and services to help recognize the quality and market relevance of the standards. Just to tell you a little bit, we actually publish technical standards and related technical information such as manuals, special technical publications, journal articles, research reports, and then for services, we also offer certification program for products and personnel, interlaboratory study assistance for the standards development, among others. So ASTM International was formed in 1898. We originally began working with the steel industries to standardize the railroading system. And we've just expanded over the last 110 some years into about 143 different technical committees covering about 100 different industry sectors. So we have participation from the industry. We have about 30,000 members comprised in our organization, and they're all come together to serve the same goal, which is to promote public health and safety. So they all work together to contribute to the reliability of the materials and products. And what these standards ultimately are aiming to do is help facilitate national, international, and regional commerce. We have over 12,000 standards, and about 6,000 of those standards are referenced in regulations or codes in about 80 different countries. So just to talk about the form of our technical committees, the standards development process within it involves all of the stakeholders. So you're going to involve the manufacturers, your academia, your national laboratories, trade associations, professional associations, you've got the research institutions, government agencies, and every member on the technical committee has an equal say. So ASTM has regulations which are, all the technical committees are required to follow, and it sets out processes to ensure that the consensus-based procedures are followed. Part of how we manage that to make sure that the standards are market relevant and accurate is to have equal say among the technical committee members. So you've got large organizations and small organizations all with the same voice. So you're not going to have a larger manufacturer dominating the standards development process. Ultimately what those standards, ultimately it's what those products are going to have to meet. Also, you have an equal balance of producers versus non-producers on the technical committee. Again, stopping a manufacturer from dominating the standards development. So you have small and large organizations with equal say, and all of the individual participants within the technical committee having an equal say. So the standards development process is also going to include both the private and public sectors. So you might ask, what is ASTM International in relation to other standards development organizations, or where do we stand within the industries? What ASTM does meet is all of the World Trade Organization's principles for an international standards development body. So we make sure part of our process has transparency, openness, impartiality, and consensus, effectiveness and relevance, coherence, and consideration of developing nations. Because our process is available to all industries at all different levels, we make sure that we have participation from all of the nations that are affected within the standards development, who's going to be using these standards. To talk a little bit about the support structure, ASTM headquarters is about 160 staff members. I myself, as a staff manager, work with the technical committees. Each technical committee is assigned its own staff manager, so we have one liaison contact for every committee, as well as an editor. So the staff managers will work directly with the technical committees to work as an advocate for the committee. We also regulate and facilitate the processes, and then editors are also there to assist the technical committees with writing to ensure that all of our standards have consistency across the board. So when you look at one standard to another, it's gone through the same process, it's got the same format, it follows the same rules, so that it's very easy for the industry to use the standards and to understand the standards. We have 143 technical committees now, even though it says 142. So just to talk about the committee structure, each committee has what we call a main committee. And this is like an umbrella committee within the technical structure of it. And it will cover any particular industry or subject area that the stakeholders have come together to agree on. And what they'll do is they will vote and form a scope of work for the committee, which will then dictate the standards development. Then the main committee will then be broken down into subcommittee sectors, covering different areas. And when I explain Committee E44, you'll see kind of how that structure works and how things break down. From there, we also have task groups. The task groups are broken down, and they can be a task group of 1 or 5 or 30 members, and that's where the actual drafting of the standard is going to occur. A lot of the technical content is decided here before it is then presented to the subcommittee to go through our balloting process. The structure of the committee also follows the same format for the balloting process. So once the task group has an acceptable draft, they'll present it to the technical subcommittee, or then it goes through an approval process to go to ballot. When it goes to ballot, it'll first go to ballot at the subcommittee level, where that smaller group of technical experts will flesh out through the document, maybe call out any controversial or maybe inaccurate areas, and decide what needs to be fixed, what would be more acceptable and accurate for the industry. Once it then passes the subcommittee level, it then goes on to the main committee level. And this is a broader acceptance for the standard. So this will go again for another round of balloting. And at this level, you need to have a 90% affirmative. So there's a very high level of consensus of the standards. And even throughout that process, when you're looking at who's reviewing the document, who's going to be providing comments and accepting the document, part of the process is to make sure that all of the key stakeholders are involved. So we'll go through promotion for the material. We will go through doing outreach for news releases and going and meeting with different organizations to get them involved and ensure that their feedback is received for that document before it's put out to the industry. Okay, so the time frame for standards development. Typically, the average is about 19 months from start to finish. For newer committees, it's a little bit lesser because most likely the activity was formed based on a need that was identified, an emerging technology or something that the industry is really passionate about, and it takes a little bit less time to get a couple of those standards out. They'll get a few key crucial standards for the industry, and that's usually a little bit less of an amount of time. From there on, it averages about 19 months for a new standard to get published. Again, it's all going to depend on the complexity of the job, the urgency of the need, the time devoted by the members, which are volunteers, and the utilization of the technology. So ASTM tries to set up a lot of online tools so everything can be done online and doesn't require too much out of the members, because the writing process and the balloting process is where a lot of the work gets done. So we try to take a lot of those administrative barriers off of the members. Part of the urgency of the need of a job was when it is identified. Just to briefly touch on how an activity comes to ASTM. Sometimes it stems from one phone call from a stakeholder who's just looking for a standard in a particular area. Sometimes it comes based out of one standard producing some results or some research, which turns around and identifies a new standard need. There are really a lot of different avenues that activities are identified. But what we will do once we identify it is we do some background research and then hold some organizational meetings to organize the stakeholders, and then start the formation of a technical committee, formation of a new subcommittee, or just the formation of a new task group under an existing committee. So how are the standards used? I do want to emphasize that the ASTM standards are voluntary. They're always voluntary until they are referenced in a code or a contract or a regulation. And they're used by tens of thousands of individuals, whether it be at a company level, agencies, whether they be by regulators. It's used by tens of thousands of people, and they are always voluntary until they are referenced in that regulation. So about 3,300 of ASTM standards are used as the basis of national standards in 72 countries. So now I'm going to touch a little bit on Technical Committee E44, which is on solar, geothermal, and alternative energy sources. E44 was formed in 1978. We have about 200 members right now with 50 published standards and multiple others underway. And the main scope of the technical committee has been just to do the development of test methods, specifications, guides, practices, terminology, any of the type of standards that the industry would need, and related to the conversion of solar and geothermal renewable energy to a directly usable energy form. So I outlined what the technical committee structure is for all of our technical committees. Technical Committee E44 is broken down into these subcommittees. So you've got one on solar heating and cooling systems and materials. We've got one on photovoltaic electric power conversion, geothermal field development, utilization, and materials, one specifically on terminology, one on glass for solar applications, and then we also have PV fire safety. And last but not least, our newest technical subcommittee is on heat metering. A little background for E4405, which is on the solar heating and cooling systems and materials. Now, the main scope of this technical subcommittee is to provide standards for the active systems of heating and swimming pools, heating of domestic water, and space heating and cooling. They currently have 18 published standards, and I list 2 of the key standards published here. Again, we have 18. There are a good amount of standards that they're reviewed and published every 5 years, and they're available on our website. Then we have Subcommittee 09, which is on the photovoltaic electric power conversion. And the main scope of their standards development is for the conversion, conditioning, storage, control, and distribution of power of an application load. They have 22 standards published. The newest standard is E2848, which is the test method for reporting PV non-concentrator system performance. Basically, what the PV subcommittee works on is the efficiency and reliability of PV modules. So they're going to talk a little bit about weathering under certain conditions. We talk a little bit about installation of the modules, among other activities. To briefly touch on 2 others, the E4420 glass for solar applications. This was formed in 2009 in response to a need identified by the Department of Energy. And we also have a committee C14, which is on glass standards. We did a little bit of collaboration with that technical committee to have some extra support for the glass, which we'll use specifically in the solar applications. And then we also have E4444 on the fire safety subcommittee. And this is going to deal with basically the safety related to the panels for module design, panel assembly, and system installation to reduce the risk of fire originating from a photovoltaic source circuit. There are a lot of different activities around fire safety of these PV modules, and ASTM works hard to ensure that the industry doesn't have a duplication of those efforts. So we have liaisons set up with the different standards development bodies, and this is the particular area that E44 will be covering. These are some new standards that are under development. I'm not going to go through and read all the titles there, but basically they're dealing with some performance, some installation, standards concepts, and then also some accelerated lifetime testing, durability and reliability, and then the fire prevention. And last but not least, the activity that I'm mainly here to speak about today is E4425, which is the newest subcommittee on heat metering. To give you a little bit of background on this activity, this derived from an EPA stakeholder outreach efforts. What they've worked with the industry is to talk to all the different renewable energy associations and stakeholders involved, and identified that there was a need for a U.S. heat metering standard. Through that development of that activity and research done with that, they came to different standards development organizations to see where would be a good home for this activity, if there was an existing expertise already together at one table. And ASTM then partnered with IATMO to harmonize the development of this heat metering standard. Currently, we're going to be working on the one heat metering standard, and then I'm sure there will be multiple others to support the different technologies that are affected. So pretty vast activity, because there are a lot of the different types of technologies that are going to be involved to make sure that it's applicable to all of them. The idea would be to standardize the metering instrumentation, because it would enhance the energy, financial, and environmental benefits generated from the energy sources and technologies. So basically, the heat metering is going to be used to measure the heat quantity absorbed or given across a heat exchange unit. I personally do not have any technical expertise to get into too much detail on that. However, I do want to encourage your involvement in this activity. It's in its infancy, and there's a lot of expertise and intelligence coming together to get this activity going. And we will be holding our first meeting virtually on May 22nd. And then the next face-to-face meeting will be at Intersolar and Semi-PV in San Francisco on July 11th. There are different ways to get involved. You can actually get involved at the task group level, where you don't need to be an ASTM member to participate. You don't need to be a member to participate in our meetings, and on the task group level for the online collaboration areas. So you'd be more than welcome to attend the meetings. Then just to talk a little bit about the MOU, what we have with IATMO. The objectives are mainly to promote communication about the activity. IATMO is going to be help providing some technical expertise within their organization to help with the standards development for heat metering. And basically what we do with the MOUs with the different associations, including IATMO, is to help avoid duplication of the work efforts of the members for standards development, to help promote knowledge and engage the experts, and to promote participation and global acceptance of the standard. So I touched on E44. There are a couple other committees that I did want to emphasize that are related to many of you in the room. We have D19 on water, which deals a lot with water quality. We have F26 on food service equipment, which deals with mainly the commercial side, so you think of restaurants and hotels, and it deals with energy and water efficiency, which is a lot of usage of water in that aspect. And then we have other committees related to the piping and other renewable energies. So this is just a snapshot of our technical committees that work a lot with sustainability and efficiency activities. So among just getting involved in the technical committees, there are different ways to be kept abreast of the different activities that are going on. On our website, you have the ability to sign up for free tracker alerts. So we do provide email notifications to our members and non-members, so you can be notified about certain activities, whether it be related to a committee or a certain industry area. And then we also have news releases that come out throughout the year. Everything is posted on our website. Again, we try to have that transparency and openness for the industry so that we can help service the industry as best as possible. And then obviously the most beneficial way to get involved is to become a member. So as a member, you would have 24-hour online access to ballots, meeting notes, agendas, roster information. It's a great way to network with the people in your industry. And you also get a copy of the ASTM standards of that technical committee. So the membership is at a bare minimum cost. It's $75. We don't like the membership to be a burden on the committee. We want it to be easy for the industry to come to us and be able to participate and have their voice in the standards development. So with that, if there are any questions.
Yeah, Christina, Peter Marco, what are your timelines for the solar energy? I know I was putting you on the spot to try to predict what that's going to look like, but if you had to I'll take your guess over most people's facts. So where do you see that going? What kind of timelines do you think we're going to see from initiation to completion on that standard?
Related to the heat metering? Yes. Well, the goal for the May 22nd meeting is to just do a little bit of background education for the subcommittee related to ASTM and the activity efforts that the EPA has made thus far. The second portion of the meeting will be to actually outline a title and scope for the document. So this will be a very important initial start for it. I think at that point we'll have a pretty good idea of expected time that it would take for the development. An average for a new activity can be between 7 and 12 months for a new standard. I think once the technical subcommittee can determine the scope of the standard as it will first be, then developing that should be relatively easy, and you may look at a year time frame for that. However, some of the discussions that I've been listening to within the different technologies that are coming into the expertise and technology that are coming into what they're trying to do for the heat metering standard, is going to create some additional complications. I think that there's different points of view on what should be required up front and what should be included initially versus what may need to come as a secondary item. So I'd say maybe your first initial standard, you may be looking at a year and a half. To talk a little bit about the balloting process, there really is no expected time frame on when a standard can be published. Sometimes you can have a standard out in as minimum as 3 months. Sometimes it could be 5 years. Sometimes it could never get published. Part of the balloting process is it requires that all of the negatives that are received on ballot are handled by the technical subcommittee. So nothing can be published until you've achieved not only that 90% affirmative, but a resolution of all of the negative voters' reasons for voting negative. That's what sometimes tends to draw out the balloting process to make it a little longer. The idea is to, one of the things we emphasize the most, I emphasize on the task group participation, because the earlier that the experts can get involved in the standards development process, the better. Because when that first draft goes to ballot, it's as accurate as possible. And then when the negatives that you're actually handling are in regards to issues that may be more resolvable. So if there's more research that needs to be done up front, it's always best to know that as soon as possible.
Any more questions? We've got one back here.
Just a question. In terms of how the committee process and the balloting operates, does ASTM staff have membership on any of these committees or voting roles, or are you just conveners of the whole process? Is that it?
Yeah, we do not have a vote. ASTM, the staff managers are neutral in the process. We come from all different backgrounds of education and things like that. Our main goal is to remain neutral, so we ensure that everybody's voice is heard and we don't take part in the voting.
Thank you.
I have another question.
When you had the slide up showing the structure, you mentioned that the drafts typically come out of the task group and then they go to a subcommittee before the main committee. Mm-hmm. And the subcommittee reviews the draft for correctness and for whatever. If the subcommittee has a lot of trouble with it, does it go back to a task group ever? Or once the task group sends a draft up, they're done?
No, the task group typically stays formed until there's an approval. And then sometimes when you go through a balloting process, you may actually discover new revisions that may be needed to be completed, and so the task group will stay active. And most of the time your task group members are members of the subcommittee. Sometimes you may have one particular subcommittee member that leads the task group and then coordinates with different colleagues of different organizations that may not necessarily be a member of the subcommittee, but they can participate. Usually you have at least the one person that represents the task group leader is a member. So they're actively involved in the review of the standards, so they're with the subcommittee.
Questions? Can always count on Bill Erickson for a question.
I don't want to disappoint you, Bob. Where do you use your language, and are there international task groups, and How is that done at ASTM?
Well, the members of our committees and the usage of our standards is international. So I personally use my language when dealing with, because I speak Spanish and a little bit of German, when I'm dealing with a little bit of outreach and speaking with them, but not necessarily within the actual standards development portion of it. The standards are mostly published in English. We do offer some in other languages that we have translated by translation agencies.
We have a question up front here. If you could wait for a microphone.
If you have meetings in offshore countries, is English the international language that they use?
Yes.
Anybody else? Well, thank you, Christine.
Thank you.